and welcome to another amazing, super special, and I truly think this is going to be one cracker of an episode. On my episode and continuing our 100 series on the sound of money, my guest is a very special one. Well, meet Roopa Kudva. She is the former CEO of CRISIL, ex-managing partner at Omidyar Networks India, and of course, most important, she is India's most respected board voices, who takes her from, basically the learnings from her childhood. And in fact, she comes from the hills of Northeast. We're going to talk about that as well. And now to the heights of the global leadership. She's also going to talk about, and I think that's the reason I connected with her, and I'm very lucky to have her time now, is about her book, a book on leadership. It's titled Beyond the Playbook. And her powerful reflections on leadership are, all there in that book. We're going to have a complete section that we're going to talk to her about her book. So first, let's welcome Roopa on our show. Hi, Roopa, and welcome to The Sound of Money.
Hi, Santosh. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Sure. Thank you so much. So, Roopa, let's start off with the journey and the kind of challenges one has in one's journey, be it their careers or their personal life. Can you share, Roopa, a pivotal moment in your career that shaped your leadership style?
Well, I'm not so sure about a pivotal moment that shaped my leadership style, but what I can talk about is two pivotal moments that really shaped my career trajectory. And as I will explain, both those moments and how I responded to those moments was very out of character for me. So the first one was really about how I got my job at CRISIL.
Okay.
I walked into CRISIL basically without an appointment. And the context was that before that, I had worked for about 6 or 6.5 years in IDBI as a project finance lender. This was in the pre-liberalization era.
Yeah.
And, at that point in time, for personal reasons, I wanted to be in Bangalore. And I wasn't quite sure whether, IDBI would agree to move me from Mumbai, where I was at that point in time, to Bangalore. And then one evening, I was just sitting around and looking at this magazine called Business World, which carried an interview with Pradeep Shah, this young dynamic CEO of CRISIL, the first CEO, the founder CEO of CRISIL. And he was talking about how he was looking at introducing this new concept in India's financial markets, the concept of credit rating. It all sounded very exciting. And as I got to the end of the interview, I read that, we are looking at expanding and we propose to set up an office in Bangalore. Okay. And I said, aha, this sounds interesting. And a couple of days later, I had gone to Worli for an interbank consortium meeting. And the CRISIL office was just a few 100 meters away from there. So I walked down the road into the CRISIL office, walked up to the reception and said, I'd like to have a meeting with Pradeep Shah. And the lady at the reception said, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, okay, why don't you take a seat? And she went in. And about 5 minutes later, the door opened and out came this man who stuck out his hand and said, hi, I'm Pradeep. And it was quite amazing because I did not have an appointment. He happened to be in the office. He happened to be free. Absolutely. And he was gracious enough to meet this young kid who didn't even have an appointment. Spent about 45 minutes with him. And at the end of the meeting, I asked him, would you be interested in hiring a person like me? And he said, of course, yes. And I was so naive at that point in time that I thought I actually had got the job. Okay. So I said, wow, now what happens next? And he said, don't you think a CV would be a good idea? Okay. And that's when I sent across my CV and I, shortly thereafter joined CRISIL and started what would end up being a 23-year unforgettable journey the last 7 or 8 of which I headed the organization myself as the CEO. So that is one pivotal moment. The second pivotal moment was many, many years later. I would say, Santosh, that for the first 15, 16 years of my career, I would not call myself very ambitious. I loved my job. I loved the learning. I loved the exposure. I loved my colleagues. But I never thought too hard about where am I headed or where is all this going to take me. Uh, and then at one point, I came back after spending a couple of years with Standard and Poor's in Paris, where I had gone on a secondment. And when I came back, I found that the role of the chief ratings officer, which is the head of the ratings business, the largest business of CRISIL, was had fallen vacant. And this was a position that reported into the CEO. And I also learned that there was no plans to fill that role. Instead, all of the sector heads, of whom I was one, would directly report to the CEO. And that's when I felt the first stirrings of ambition. And I really felt very strongly that this company, there was value to having a chief rating officer role. And I felt that it was something I had a few ideas about and could possibly do well. And so I remember we were on an offsite. All of us were on offsite in Goa. The CEO was there. And one night I sat down and made a 3-slide PowerPoint presentation. It was horribly amateurish by today's standards. And that presentation was titled, Why CRISIL Needs a Chief Rating Officer and Why I Could Be That Person. And I buttonholed him for 20 minutes. He gave me 20 minutes of his time, listened to me patiently, did not say a word, smiled at the end of it and said, leave it with me. And after that, I didn't hear anything for a few months. And I said, oh, well, I've tried, and I went back to my work. And then one day, a few months later, he walked up to my desk and said, hey, can I see you in my office? And I went into his office and he said, remember that presentation you made to me at Goa? Well, I've discussed with the board and we are very happy to offer you the role of the chief rating officer. And that one move completely changed the trajectory of my career. It set me up to become the CEO of the firm in a few years. So as you can see, both these moments were very pivotal for me, Santosh. And what is very interesting is that normally I'm quite an organized, deliberate, very highly planned. In fact, people always accuse me of being over-prepared for situations, right? And here in these two most pivotal moments, you can see there was no great planning. It was just impulse and seizing an opportunity and raising my hand.
Absolutely. But I realized, right, as you were telling me, Roopa, a very important learning here, right, for even our audiences. At least, you asked for that, whatever it is. You go and step in, walk in and meet the receptionist. Secondly, for that presentation, whatever, 20 odd minutes, though you were not too sure about the deck itself. But see, that itself is an inherent important point to be remembered, that you took that opportunity. At least you had that confidence to go and ask. Worst case, they may say no, right? That which you were, I guess, ready for. But you had that, inclination. Why not go and even ask? So it's a very important. Many times in our organizations, we don't even have that courage. I would say to even ask. Worst case, it will be no. But if you ask, people listen. People will give time, right?
That's true. And of course, all these learnings have become more clear on hindsight. I wouldn't really say that at that point in time I had given it too much thought. It was just very impulsive. But when I look back, I do see a pattern of seizing opportunities when they arise, being open to doing new things, and also being, not hesitating to raise my hand. And I think these are things that, really paid off for me and have proved to be very helpful.
Wonderful. I realize that, in terms of your growing up years, your experience, you come from the Meghalaya, which is amongst the Seven Sisters. And I can imagine Meghalaya in those years, right? Because Northeast was as good as not, like we never included it as a part of India. Our thought process was very different. It's later on, there was a lot of impetus, a lot of focus, right? So how did this experience growing up in Meghalaya, and typically, as I know, it's a very traditionally a matrilineal society influence, right? How did that impact approach your leadership? Because end of the day, it's the childhood conditioning that impacts each of us. End of the day, right? So how has that been panned out?
No, you're right, Santosh. All of us are shaped by early influences, the family context, the times we grow up in, and the society we grow up in. And I was no different.
Yeah.
I grew up in Assam and Meghalaya, mostly in small towns. It was a slow and simple life, close to nature, with very little exposure to business or city life. However, one thing I absorbed quite early was that it was very important for women to work and to become financially independent.
Mm.
And this happened in a few different ways. Uh, I observed that a few women professionals around me, including a few bureaucrats that I knew, I saw people's attitudes towards them.
Mm.
I noticed that they were treated differently. They were taken more seriously.
Yeah.
And at some point, I saw my own mother who trained, who was a homemaker, but who trained eventually as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I saw how attitudes towards her changed
Mm.
once she started working outside the home. And Meghalaya, as you rightly pointed out, is a matrilineal society. And so women played a significant role in family, in the community, and also in business life. And during my growing up years, the prime minister of the country was also a woman. So all these influences, I think, have quietly shaped me. I think just the simplicity that growing up in the values of simplicity that growing up amidst nature brings,
Yeah.
the influences of all these women I came across early in my childhood, I think have shaped very much the person I've become.
Okay, and I'm sure these are some of probably there are because some challenges as a woman leader, right? In the financial sector, how did you overcome? How did you actually overcome them? And just to kind of correlate, very recently there was an kind of interview which. The ex-PepsiCo CEO Indira Nui, she said, "Oh, it's America that gave her the opportunity." But we have so many examples, including in India, and you are one of them, where you have been a very successful CEO. So, in that terms, what are the kind of challenges you face when you meet your employees, your one down, because they also have equal experience, exposure. They are sometimes we find the one downs are far smarter sometimes than us, right? But then you as a leader, it's all about channeling it in the right direction. So how do you face these kind of challenges? How do you actually overcome them?
To be candid, I would say that I was fortunate to be a part of the kinds of organizations I was. Whether it was CRISIL, whether it was ONI and impact investing, I was also very fortunate to have the kind of background I had, both in terms of my upbringing, my education. I went to IIM Ahmedabad, which itself I think is not the norm. And I do recognize, therefore, that I have been more privileged than most women are. What worked for me is I stopped trying to blend in. As I prepared very deeply, I made sure I prepared very deeply. I acted with conviction in everything that I did. And then I let performance speak for itself. But having said that, I think it's really important to understand and acknowledge and recognize that most women are not in this situation. And we all know, and Santosh, you've been a banker yourself, and you also know as well that the transition from mid management to senior management is very hard for anyone, whether you're a man or whether you're a woman. But for women, there are certain additional challenges, and let me talk about them. For many years, and rightly so, the conversation about women's careers has been dominated only by one explanation. You only hear about maternity breaks, and caregiving interruptions. I believe that without taking away from the importance of those issues, I do believe that that narrative has become a little tired.
Yeah.
It's become a little incomplete because it explains some exits, but it does not explain why so many women who remain in the workforce today still do not progress proportionately into leadership. Now, why does that happen? I think there are a few reasons. The first is, um, what I call the likability factor. Now, research has consistently shown that if you're that successful women are less liked than successful men. If a woman, for example, is forceful, she is risking being labeled as aggressive. The same behavior in a man and a woman is interpreted differently. A firm view from a man is called conviction. From a woman, it may be described as sharp. If a man is pushing deadlines hard, uh, it will be called high standards. But from a woman, it will be seen as harsh behavior. And that happens not because people are bad or intentionally mean. It happens because leadership traits like assertiveness, authority, and driving accountability are seen to be in conflict with our age-old millennia of conditioning that women are supposed to be soft and nurturing, right? So I think that is how it plays out in the workforce. Absolutely. The second challenge women face is self-belief. Uh, you know, because of years of conditioning, because of the fact that, hey, if I become a leader, there's a possibility that I won't be liked. Everybody, we are all human. We all like to be liked. And that really creates a little bit of lack of self-belief in the women themselves. We all have heard the story about how men will apply for a role if they meet 60% of the criteria. We're saying, "Wow, I meet 60% of the criteria. Let me take a chance." Whereas a woman for the same criteria will say, "Oh, I don't meet 40% of the criteria. Let me not apply." So this is a manifestation of a lack of self-belief. And then women also don't advocate for themselves. We don't raise our hands enough for the top roles. And that is why I think this needs to be a general conversation. It cannot be a women's only conversation. Men need to get involved. We need to go beyond what we have tried for 20 years and I think has not resulted in too much success. Initiatives like women's networking forums, mentorship. I'm not saying they are bad, but I don't think they've moved the needle. What we really need now is active sponsorship of women for the top management roles. And let me make it very clear, I'm not talking about fixing men or fixing women. It is about encouraging women, not just saying we need to promote women, but also developing a deeper understanding of the barriers women face. Because let's face it, even today, the balance of power in the business world is still tilted towards men. Right? So I think we all need to do more. Men need to do more, women need to do more to sponsor other women. Now, just one quick point finally. Whenever I talk about sponsoring women, I often hear people saying, but if we go all out to support women, aren't we compromising merit? And I think that's a misunderstanding. Promoting women is not anti-merit. It is actually how we are giving ourselves the chance to uncover more merit and figure out where the merit lies and expand our talent pool. Effectively, think about it. If we exclude half the available talent, we are not protecting merit. We are narrowing merit. Absolutely. And in a competitive environment, that's simply a strategic mistake. So while I myself, as I said, have been singularly fortunate, these are the kinds of issues I think about a lot. And my own understanding of these issues has grown over the last few decades. If you spoke to me when I was, say, 30 years ago, I would have said, women, we have to make it on our own. We don't need additional support and all of that. Today, my views have changed. And all that I outlined to you just now has been a process of learning, has been a process of discovery. Talking to younger women has helped me understand these perspectives a lot better. And then as I developed a greater understanding of these, I tried very consciously took on the responsibility of focusing, amongst other things, on the barriers that women face in career progression.
Yeah. In fact, when it comes to women, I've seen that with my office colleagues, right? What happens, Roopa, is they are able to dabble well the challenges. They have their home front, they have their kids to manage, the school, PTA meetings, the school results, school report cards. Plus, they have to handle maybe the in-laws, so they're able to dabble. And at the same time, when it comes to managing the department or the office issues, they are very, very good at it. So even that is an important, the perseverance levels, I would strongly say, are more firmer up there, right, when it comes to women. So yeah,
I want to challenge that a bit, though, Santosh, if I may, because this is a very interesting discussion, and this is something which I've been talking a lot about lately. You often hear things like, "Oh, women can be very good leaders because they are great multitaskers," just like you said, or they're very empathetic, or they are better at communication. I actually will push back against that, and I will say that any traits like this, leadership traits, they are not chromosomal, they are not genetic, right? If you start saying that women are inherently better multitaskers, you then are implicitly agreeing that your behavioral characteristic or leadership characteristics are somehow linked to your gender, in which case you can equally make the argument that, oh, men are better strategic thinkers, they are more visionary and all of that. If you say women are better multitaskers and you accept that argument, then you might have to accept the argument that men are more strategic, right? And I think both are false. You have women who are strategic, you have men who are good multitaskers, right? So I think women themselves should be very careful about how we accept these labels, because you can't accept only one side of the argument and not accept the other.
Correct. I wanted to talk to you about this, your book, Leadership Beyond the Playbook. In your book, you emphasize the importance of kind of a purpose-driven leadership. There has to be a purpose behind it. How do you kind of define that purpose in a leadership context?
Purpose is a word we hear a lot these days, right? Everyone's talking about purpose, but very often it feels abstract. And because the term feels abstract, it often gets dismissed as, oh, this is just corporate fluff, or this is nice to talk about. The way I think of purpose, it is the reason to exist beyond making money. And when people find purpose in their work, everything feels more meaningful. Work becomes a source of pride. It becomes a source of energy. It is the biggest antidote to what young people feel these days, which is FOMO, fear of missing out. It's an antidote to burnout. It's an antidote to constantly feeling that you're on a treadmill and feeling overwhelmed. The emails coming in, meetings all the time. And so, if you have a sense of purpose, it's a nice antidote to all of this. In my book, I have an entire chapter on purpose, but there are two main points that I make there. The first is that, purpose does not arrive neatly formed. It is a gradual process of discovery. It doesn't come from an aha moment or a single moment of reflection right up front in your career. It actually emerges through practice in a few ways. Firstly, you have to immerse yourself. You have to be curious and immerse yourself in real problems. And I've had so many people come up to me after 6 months or 1 year and say, I've learned everything there is to learn about this industry, for example. But if you really want to discover your purpose, you have to immerse, you have to understand what the challenges are, And you also have to see whether you are emotionally able to connect to that kind of work. Does it resonate with you emotionally? Does it give you energy? Another way you could find purpose is by looking at role models. When I was in the world of impact investing, supporting startup entrepreneurs who were purpose driven, it was amazing to see how their entire approach to business was so driven by their purpose. The business models would change, and as you know, startups are constantly pivoting, but their main purpose always remained unchanged. So purpose became a big anchor for giving them direction. And then also, purpose does not need to be this big, grand, lofty thing. You can also find purpose in how you approach your day-to-day work. Are you hiring people inclusively? Are you supporting small businesses in your day-to-day work? Are you creating opportunities for other people? Are you mentoring others? So these are all different ways in which we can find our purpose. And it's also important to point out that purpose is not something that has to be constant for your whole life. Things change in life, roles expand, your personal situation changes, your constraint changes, and therefore, your purpose can evolve. I found in my own case, purpose evolving over my career. And final point I'll make about purpose is that, look, at the end of the day, purpose becomes real only when it is used to guide decisions. It has to shape what you say yes to, what you say no to, what are the trade-offs you're willing to accept. And let me give you a few examples. When CRISIL, for example, our purpose was making markets function better. And that meant that we had to engage very deeply with the investor community who did not pay us. They were not our customers, but they were the users of our rating, right? Because we were clear that our purpose is to make markets function better, we engaged with them. In impact investing, because our investment thesis was focused on India's next $500 billion, in every investment decision, we would try to make an assessment of, what is the proportion of this firm's customers that are likely to come from that segment of the population. And if it didn't meet a certain threshold, we wouldn't invest, even though the business may have been great, because that was not the purpose we were here for. So purpose really has to be something that guides your decision making and becomes a living compass, for what you will do and what you will not do.
Absolutely. In fact, you write about the need for leaders also to be adaptable and context aware. Can you share a few examples or experiences from your own, where you had to adjust, and that adjust is something where there was maybe even a paradigm change in the way you thought or you organize or you schedule something to your leadership approach?
I think the biggest change in my leadership approach had to come when I moved from CRISIL to Omidyar Network India. And, when I had my decision to leave CRISIL was public for a while, because we were a listed company and this was information that we had to release to the stock markets as soon as I made the decision. And of course, I was with the company for several months thereafter during the transition period. But because people knew that, I'm moving out, different people started approaching me and engaging with me for potential roles in my next phase. And one evening around Christmas time, I get a call from a California number. And this person says, I'm from Omidyar Network. We are an impact investing firm. And we'd like to have a conversation about you, about heading our India business. And at that time, I had not even heard about impact investing, didn't even know what it was. And I said, why are you calling me? I don't know anything about anything about this business. And he said, look, we are shutting down for the Christmas holidays now. Why don't you do some digging and we'll talk again when we come back in the new year. And when I went and I then did some homework, I noticed two things. Which were very interesting when I went to their website. One is that the people in the firm were incredibly accomplished. And I said to myself, these are people who could be doing almost anything that they wanted. And the fact that they've chosen to be here means that this place must be somewhat special. The second interesting thing I noticed that whether it was the boy who made chai in our office in Mumbai,
Yeah.
or whether it was the founder or the managing partner of the firm, all of them were featured on the website, and all of them had an equal 150-word write-up
Wow, it speaks
about
so much,
themselves.
right? It speaks so much.
It tells you a lot. And I said, this is something I have never seen before.
Yeah.
And, and of course, there was this whole exciting world of startups, which seemed attractive. But those two things really helped me make up my mind that, hey, this is a firm that I would love to be a part of, even though I don't know much about the domain.
Yeah.
Now, when I joined the firm, let's talk about the leadership style. There were very massive, I may almost say reinventions that I had to do.
Okay.
And starting with identity. I was moving from being a CEO of a listed company with a corner office, the usual trappings, 5 people in the CEO's office dedicated to my office and my work, to moving to an organization where there were only 30 people compared to thousands of people in CRISIL, where I did not have an office. I had to sit in an open office with everybody else. I did not even have an assistant to myself. We all in the office shared 2 assistants.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, for me, this was for a lot of us, our identity is tied to our work and our titles, right? Yeah. So this was a huge adjustment that I had that I knew I would have to make, but in fact, fortunately, it was not too difficult for me to do it. The bigger challenge was really about domain knowledge and mindset.
Yeah.
I moved from a setup where in CRISIL we were evaluating companies which had a well-established track record, where the promoters were very seasoned. There was a lot of data and information. To learning about this whole new world of tech and startups, where the pace is faster, and we are supporting entrepreneurs who are in their 20s, no track record, often with just an idea on paper. And their business also keeps pivoting, right? And so this meant that I had to shift my approach from thinking about the risks, because in a credit business, you're thinking about what could go wrong. Whereas in a startup investing business, early stage investing business, you're thinking about what can go right. So I had to shift my mindset to think more about the possibility. Of course, we thought about the risk, but your mindset had to be one of possibility. And then there was the other shift, from being an operator to an investor. If you're an operator, you are the person who's figuring out all the answers and figuring out all the solutions. Whereas if you're an investor, you have to take one step back and support people who have the answer. And I would just say the big change in leadership style also came from the kind of people I had to deal with. At Omidyar Network India, I was older than the parents of most of my team members. So they didn't care about my credibility. Totally. They didn't care about my credibility. They didn't care about what I had done in the past. I had to rebuild credibility, gain their trust. I had to operate in an environment where teams were super smart. They expected to be engaged because we were a small firm. They expected to be engaged in all decisions. They wanted clear feedback. And they came from a much more individualistic culture of an investment firm. So on all these levels, in terms of whether it was my identity, whether it was the whole domain knowledge and the mindset, and then the leadership style in dealing with a much younger set of colleagues and working effectively with them. All of these, I think, required major changes and what I almost think of as a reinvention.
How much of a time, in terms of months maybe or weeks maybe, it took you to kind of adjust to, or rather recalibrate to, the expectations that were coming up?
I think it happened as I went along. I think the domain it was easier, I would say. The mindset shifts were in terms of moving from a risk mindset to a possibility mindset uh, was also not that difficult. I think learning to work with younger people
Yeah.
was a huge learning curve for me and very rewarding. The other thing that was rewarding really for me was this whole exposure to the world of what we call the next half billion, the second wave of internet users. It really made the whole experience so meaningful because understanding this population, understanding their digital journeys,
Yeah.
as well as their aspirations, it really changed my lens on inclusion. And it showed to me so clearly how technology can expand opportunity. And over time, I saw that so many of the entrepreneurs that we were supporting were not from the elite backgrounds or the premium engineering colleges or the metros. They were increasingly coming from the smaller towns of India, and they were solving problems that they had themselves lived. Whether it was language, you had to reinvent the internet with Indian languages, for example, right? How to improve access and affordability to basic services. And then, there was the whole timing of my move, Santosh. It coincided with the period when the benefits of the Jandhan Aadhaar mobile trinity were being realized.
Okay.
And at the time when Jio dramatically dropped the cost of data, leading to a massive market expansion.
Absolutely.
So it was like drinking from the fire hose, on so many fronts. But it was exceptionally rewarding, and I'm really glad because I think it catapulted me into the new world of innovation, of an aspirational India, of what can be done with the power of technology, and the reason why development has to be inclusive.
Absolutely. In fact, I just happened to have a podcast with Dr. Pramod Verma recently, and he was telling me the same thing, right? 2016. If you look at it in that sense, right, when the demon happened, right, it all led to certain things, right? From, of course, the Jandan, the thing had started, Jan Trinity, followed by the UPI coming in, then comes Geo, the prices crashed, and it's just all coming off together in India, the UPI eventually, right? So I kind of completely agree and kind of understand how it kind of the whole ecosystem adjusted in its own best way, right? Yeah. So Roopa, I wanted to know what actually inspired you to write this book, Leadership Beyond the Playbook, and what do you hope your readers? What are the takeaways, right? Both in terms of their own leadership skill sets and even personal growth.
The motivation for writing this book really came from looking back at my own journey. Whether it was beginning with the factory floors, visiting factory floors in the 1980s, to working on pioneering a new concept in India of credit ratings, or whether it was impact investing for the next half billion, or the trade-offs that I saw happening in the boardrooms that I was fortunate to be a part of several boards. That showed me the reality of leadership. And that reality is that leadership is not neat. And yet, too often, it gets reduced into very neat frameworks. What are the 5 habits? What are the 7 steps? But in truth, for each of us, the leadership journey is very unique. It's very personal. It depends or is shaped by our own context, what choices we've made, and the values that we stand by. And so this book I really thought of as a leadership companion. It helps you answer the question, what kind of a leader do I want to be? And then gives you the tool to craft your own path towards that. So in the book, I've included not just stories from my own journey, but I've also included many more leaders across industries, whether they be startups or corporates, because leadership is not sector specific. As you grow more senior, what matters is your breadth of perspective and your ability to connect the dots. Also, I wanted to write a book on very contemporary topics. So the book has chapters. One of the chapters is on purpose, which we talked about. There's a chapter on resilience. working across generations. What does it mean to lead in the era of AI? And then, of course, there are the classic topics of strategy, execution, and communication.
Mm.
I, while the book does not tell you what to do, at the end there is a practical do-it-yourself leadership kit,
Yeah.
which, based on the perspectives of the book and what you take away from each of these chapters,
Yeah.
you can use that to create your own 90-day action plan.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm really hoping is that for people who are serious about leadership, I hope this book will start giving them the confidence that to become a leader, you don't need to copy anyone else's playbook.
Yeah.
You can write your own playbook.
Yeah.
And so, the way the book I feel is different is that most leadership books are written by consultants or they're written by academics.
Mm.
And therefore, they naturally and understandably tend to gravitate towards frameworks.
Yeah.
And even those written by practitioners, they usually focus on, how I've led a single organization.
Mm.
And so I've tried to do something different. I've tried to step back, help readers to step back, and to reflect on the full range of leadership issues that come at them.
Mm.
And they come all at once.
Mm.
It's not that you're dealing with strategy one day and communication next day and risk management the third day, right? They come all at once, and you have to deal with them all at once. So that is what I've tried to do with the book. I'm really happy that the book has resonated very well since the time it was launched, and I'm really pleased with the feedback I'm getting. I'm really pleased with the opportunity the book has provided me to engage with so many people on so many different platforms. So it's been a learning experience and a rewarding experience for me as well.
Yeah. So that was my next question. Feedback, with readers who come back to you. What kind of sharings they have had with you in terms of once were they able to resonate, and any practical victories in that sense that they feel?
Yes. I think a few things that keep coming out are, one is that this is a very modern book. In the sense that younger people find that it speaks to the issues that they care about.
Yeah.
It feels very contemporary is the first feedback that I've got.
Yeah.
The second feedback that I've got is that, hey, this made me look at things differently. Whether it be purpose, whether it be resilience, whether it be there's a whole chapter on women in leadership.
Yeah.
So all these three areas have resonated very strongly. And then people have appreciated the fact that I've trusted the reader. That I trust the readers enough not to tell them what to do, but to share all these perspectives, and they are mature enough to figure out what will work best for them. And then at the end, with the leadership toolkit, I've had readers sending me parts of the toolkit that they've filled up, and they've shared it with me over LinkedIn and WhatsApp.
Yeah.
It's been tremendous. I've also quite gratified to see that about 50, 60 people, many of whom I don't know, have sat and written elaborate reviews of the book on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
The media has also been very positive in terms of the reviews that it has carried.
Yeah.
So overall, I think it's been, it's been a fun.
Wonderful. And I'm sure so satisfying, right? When you see a LinkedIn post, and in fact, I have read them too, where readers have come back to you saying, thank you so much. And this is what the kind of changes I've done in my life, in my professional life. So I'm sure it's like, that's what you are eventually aiming for. And then you have actual readers coming back to you on this. I'm sure it's a lot satisfying, right? So
Yes.
So I wanted to talk to you about, because you're a board member on several prominent companies. And again, today, independent director or boards in general, there's a lot of discussion around happening, right? Especially in the BFSI space. So how do you actually, in terms of the key responsibilities that come along of a board, how do you drive that long-term success? How do you navigate those tensions that probably happen between, members and the management, of course? And you have your own challenges, right? You have experienced it in your own career, and you see, oh, there is a red flag there. How do you kind of navigate it in the right way?
Yeah, and I've been fortunate that I have seen boards from both sides. First, as a CEO, and I was the CEO of a listed company. So not only was I a board member, but I was also a CEO working with other board members.
Yeah.
And then I've seen it from the other side, purely being an independent director.
True. Yeah.
On several companies.
Yeah.
And if I look back at both sets of experiences, I would say that what makes a board truly effective are a few things. First, I think, is the ability of the board to discharge a very wide set of responsibility, a diverse set of responsibility.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the board also needs to strike the right balance between in various ways and make trade-offs. And let me explain. Let's talk about the range of responsibilities of the board.
Yeah.
The role of a board is not to manage the company. The role of the board is to provide strategic insight, and that makes the role very wide.
Yeah.
First, of course, we have the fiduciary responsibilities, right? Whether it is reporting, disclosures, financial controls, compliance, and things like that. But beyond that, boards also have to approve the strategy of the company. They have to approve capital allocation. They are responsible for hiring the CEO and, if necessary, for firing the CEO, and for succession planning at the senior levels. And they also need to think about replenishing the board itself. How does the board look in the future? And also about constantly training board members, because the environment is changing so fast. So, a good board must learn to do all these things well at the same time. So that's number one. Number two is the fact that I talked about balance. What do I mean by balance? A good board really knows when to support management and when to challenge management. It knows how to balance short-term performance with long-term vision. It also knows that it's not just about equity shareholders' interests. It is also protecting the interests of a whole range of other stakeholders. You have to balance equity shareholders' interests with the interests of your employees, customers, your suppliers, your lenders, or even the society at large, right? It's not just maximizing value for one stakeholder, it's about balanced value creation for all stakeholders. And then, of course, there are things like, while you provide oversight, because many people on the boards have been operators themselves or CEOs themselves, it's very important to make sure you don't get into micromanaging the company. So you are there to govern, you're not there to manage. And amidst all the compliance work that you need to do today, particularly in financial services, as you pointed out, a board still has to focus on long-term issues like strategy or disruption or culture. So these two things, managing the wide set of responsibilities and figuring out a balanced approach across all these various dimensions is important. And I think I have seen what difference a good board can make. I have experienced it. And, when I was the CEO, initially I was a little hesitant in dealing with my board. I was defensive because I would think that, the directors are here to evaluate me. But over time, I realized that they were my biggest strength. They were thought partners who could point out blind spots that I missed. They held a mirror to me. They could tell me things about myself that nobody else ever could. And that was really valuable, and it contributed to my own growth as a leader. So I think boards can play a very vital role. It's also important to remember that great board, just because you're a board that has great board members, it doesn't mean that you have a great board. Because it's all about how those great people work together as a team in the best interests of the organization.
True. One last question before I let you go. Roopa, you've seen, in fact, your book talks about your career, the growth, but in terms of future, right? In terms of what are your kind of, where do you see this in terms of the new workplace in the next decade, especially with the India's demographic dividend, but also the challenges around AI, because a lot of jobs probably may go, and of course, shaping the future leadership and governance. Where do you see the next decade for so far as India is concerned?
So firstly, let me talk about leadership style. I can talk about AI later if you want, because they are two really, while they are linked, there are nuances. I think how leadership styles evolve over the next decade will be shaped by the fact that we now have a new generation taking over leadership, which is the millennial generation. And we also have to meet the aspirations of an increasing proportion of the workforce, which is Gen Z. Now, if you look at millennials who are leaders, what do you see? I think that millennials are very well equipped to lead, actually. Their natural inclination, they've been taught about collaboration right from the beginning, from their school days, for example, right? So they inherently tend to be collaborative. They tend to be more candid than people of my generation on issues like feedback. They have a greater sense of purpose. They are comfortable with technology. All these are massive positives as they take over leadership. But I think there are a few areas where millennials will need to focus on as they assume positions of top management. First of all, I think because of the collaborative nature which comes inherently to them, they need to get comfortable with making tough decisions, particularly when your team doesn't agree. Leadership often means that you are the one who has to make a call when there's disagreement. And you have to get comfortable with doing that. This is not about, leadership is not a popularity contest. It is about doing what is best in the long-term interest of the organization. The other thing millennials will have to start learning to do is, how do you evaluate your team members, not just on your current contributions, but on their potentials? Millennials are driven by a deep sense of equity, and they often see promotions as reward for past contributions. But really, I think at the senior most levels, you need to be able to spot the ones who have what it takes to take it to rise to the next level. And then I think they need to learn how to say no. It's just as important as learning how to say yes. And one last point on millennials before I come to Gen Z, which is a very different characteristic altogether. So the point is that there's a lot of talk about work-life balance, which I think is good. And I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I have my friends outside of work, right? My people, my colleagues at work are just my colleagues. But to them, I want to say, please do not forget that relationships matter. Relationships at work matter, even though you have a life outside work. Invest in those relationships, and that is what will pay off. And that's the only thing that will matter in the long term, really. So I think that's, when it comes to Gen Z, I think we are all misreading Gen Z. I hear so many of my colleagues and friends saying things like, oh, Gen Z lacks staying power, they don't have commitment, they're expecting too much too soon. I think that diagnosis is wrong, Santosh. I think what we are seeing is a generation that has adapted faster to a changing environment that organizations have adapted.
Exactly.
I don't think Gen Z is disloyal. It is organizations who have broken the loyalty contract. Organizations restructure, they pivot, they eliminate roles with regularity. So what we had when I started my career, which is loyalty in exchange for security, that contract has been broken by employers, not by employees. And Gen Z has simply seen this happening, and they have built their own conclusion that we need to take charge of our own employability because we can't depend on institutional commitment. And the other thing is that, therefore, climbing the career ladder doesn't quite meet their aspirations because they are not even sure whether the organization itself will be around 40 years down the line. Their career horizon is 25 to 40 years. So their real question is not how do I get to the top? It is how do I stay relevant across 4 decades of disruption? And, so therefore, when they move from role to role, or they have what I call these squiggly careers, That was a nice term that I came across. They are not being disloyal. They are not being impetuous. They are just making sure that they have the requisite skills to be relevant at every point in time. And for them, it's not just about the money. They also value the learning opportunity, they also value the work environment. So I think leadership has to recognize the changing character of the workforce and given the environment we are in. And that's a massive change we will see, I think, with the millennials taking over leadership.
Absolutely.
Do you want me to talk about AI as well? Do we have the time?
Yes, of course. Yeah, we can have a quick. Because you have seen AI from a different lens now, right? And where do you
Yes,
see this heading? Yeah.
yes, yes. There's no doubt that AI will significantly reshape both industries and organizations. We're already seeing it, whether it's healthcare, finance, creative fields like fashion or journalism, we are going to see major shifts.
Yeah.
And with that, organization structures will change.
Yeah.
As AI handles more data crunching, analysis, or even decision making now, right, with agentic AI, decision making will become much more decentralized. And many of the layers that we have in organizations now will no longer be needed. That's a reality. So, what does this mean? If AI is doing a lot more of the analysis, a lot more of the decision making, what will leaders do? I think leaders will need to stop spending time on decisions that AI can already make. And instead, they need to become what I call AI strategists. That means making decisions like, where do I use AI? Where do I not use AI? How do I interpret AI's output? What do I challenge in the AI output? What do I override in the AI output, right? Should I reskill my employees? How? How do I manage new risks?
Yeah.
All this is what being an AI strategist is about. You will also need to become an ethical guardian. By that I mean, thinking a lot more seriously about issues like privacy, about transparency, about algorithmic bias. Think about it. There were Zillow, there was, Amazon. Let me take the example of Amazon. A few years ago, announced that they were discontinuing one of their AI models for recruitment because that had been trained only using male CVs. And so women were getting excluded from the hiring process, right? Similarly, Zillow had to do a huge write-off in one of its businesses during COVID because the algorithm was not designed for a very long period between the time they brought the property, renovated it, and flipped it, right? Because COVID brought work to a standstill.
Yeah.
So you have to get into the algorithm and the issues of bias and dependability. And finally, I think there is no doubt that AI is going to change society. You as a business leader cannot be removed from what is happening in society. So you will need to have a viewpoint. Your employees will expect you to have a viewpoint. You will have to be sensitive to what is happening in the society at large and not just say, I'm here to manage my business. However, I think good leaders will still be required because you still need the moral judgment. You still need the empathy. You still need the ability to navigate complex stakeholder dynamics. So I think that the leader of 10 years down the line will look very different from the leader of today.
Absolutely. As they say, right, the Apna intelligence is also going to be equally more important than the artificial intelligence. On that very, very optimistic, positive note, Roopa Kudva, thank you so much for being on this podcast, Sound of Money, on my 100th series.
Thank you so much, Santosh, for having me.
Yeah. And yes, with that, we come to the end of this episode of the Sound of Money in its 100th series. From my guest, Ms. Roopa Kudva, and me, Santosh Sirur. Thanks again for joining on the Sound of Money. Bye-bye and take care.